Listen to the Vibes, hosted by Coyote Knight. Listen in for some positivity and good times. The views and opinions of our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the host or the Vibes Broadcast Network. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. I have here a young man named Chris Chapman. And this gentleman, if you just read his bio, that's motivation enough for you. But we're going to let him talk a little bit about himself and how he's gotten to where he's at now. How you doing, Chris?
I'm good, Kyle. Thanks for asking. I know you're in Austin and I'm in Charlotte, so just excited to be here, right?
Yeah, well, it is exciting to be in Austin.
Yeah, and Charlotte.
You a Panthers fan?
Sadly, yeah. We'll see if the season turns around a little bit. With the new draft, we just got some defensive players. So,
hey, you never know what can happen, man. I'm hoping my Cowboys can turn it around this year. So.
Oh yeah, that's true. Both can be struggling teams at sometimes, right?
Yeah, they both seem to drive me up the wall. They don't win when I want them to win.
Yeah, that's usually how football works, right?
Yeah, but at least I'm not a Texans fan, so.
True. Hey, well, I'm a Clemson grad, so I got a shout out to Deshaun Watson on there, honestly. So
I'm gonna tell you what, he's the brightest star on that whole team, if you ask me. I like that young man.
Yeah, definitely good head on his shoulders for sure.
Yep. So you grew up in Charlotte?
No, I actually grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, but ultimately moved to Charlotte about 2 years back and been able to fortunately lay a pretty solid foundation here, so very excited about that.
And you got started working when you were pretty young, huh?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in Charleston, and it's funny when people hear that, they're like, oh, he must have came from some money, just because that's known as at some parts some of a wealthier area. But I grew up in kind of just a normal middle-class family. Always had a roof over our head growing up, but, never went on any vacations or, had to start working at an early age to really start, providing for the lifestyle that I ultimately wanted in life. So I kind of got a lot of my entrepreneurial tendencies that I have now, starting at 12, just going door to door, knocking on people's doors, asking if I can cut their grass for, about half the price of what the big guys are charging. So
I know exactly what you mean. I was the kid that was doing it for $5 and everybody else was doing it for 20. Of course, that was in the 70s, so, I'm telling on myself there.
Yeah, it's funny because I would look up the price of what these guys were charging, and sometimes I would call them, pretend to be a customer, get a quote, and then I'm saying, okay, this is the average price, and then I go in and just undercut everyone. So I didn't need $60, $70 a yard. I was 12 years old. $20 is enough for me at that time,
Oh, I hear you. That's actually pretty smart.
Yeah, definitely. So, that's kind of where it all begins, starting work ethic at that early age, realizing, okay, here's the situation I'm in now, point A. What am I going to do to get to that point B? And at that time, it was going door to door, cutting grass, providing, getting money at a young age. And I was very fortunate that I was able to adopt that work ethic very young because, unfortunately, I feel like a lot of people in the millennial generation, which is what I'm in, take a long time sometimes to adopt that work ethic of, okay, I'm here now. What can I do to get that to that next point, which is point B? And I'm just excited that I was able to get that at an early age.
So when you were making that money, what was keeping you from doing like most kids and just going and blowing it all on candy and soda waters and, just junk?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, I won't lie to you, there was definitely some temptations there to start blowing that money. But, I've always been, adopting the mindset of daily habits. So, if you want to get, for example, when I was 12, I was saving up so I could go to skateboarding or surfing camp. And, that was about $500-$600. And so everything that I did on a daily basis was asking myself, like, okay, is going out to the movies 2 or 3 times a week going to help me get to that goal? No, I'm not going to do it. Is skipping, cutting the grass to sleep in going to get me to that goal? No. So I'm going to wake up and do it. And ultimately, I adopted that mindset even more when I started, getting my first job at Harris Teeter, which is a grocery store as a cashier. And I was saving up for my first car. And the big thing that was driving me at that time was a lot of my other colleagues and friends already had their first cars because it was paid for by their family. And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, now I'm in a race to get there because I'm just going to get left in the dust, literally left in the dust if I don't, get my own car. So, again, asking yourself, okay, is this daily habit or is this thing that I'm about to do gonna get me to my goal? If not, then I'm gonna need to have to evaluate that and kind of rethink my decision. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking there's a lot of adults that could use that philosophy. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
so what was that first car?
Yeah, it was a bright red 1999 Nissan Pathfinder.
Hey, that's a good vehicle. Those
Loved it.
Nissans, Toyotas, all them cars, they're awesome.
Yeah, it didn't last as long as I thought. It only lasted a few years, but hey, it was fun while I had it.
Well, I guess your parents kind of instilled that into you because I know so many parents nowadays they feel it they have to get their kids the cell phones and the computers and all that kind of stuff. And like you said, they're buying them cars and all that junk. Uh, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is your parents must have said, "Hey, you know what? This is the real life. This is the way things are." I mean, is that accurate?
Yeah, so well, shout out to my parents on that end because they weren't real vocal about the financial situation. They never really said, "Oh, hey, we don't have as much money as most of the people in this area." But I realized it with a lot of self-awareness that, oh, wait, we're not going on 2 or 3 vacations a year like most people. Wonder why that is, or oh, why didn't I get a chance to do this or do that, et cetera, et cetera. So I realized that self-awareness, but something they did instill in me is that work ethic because of the situation that I was in there. And another thing that they instilled in me is, hey, if you want to get to that point A to point B, then you actually have to start putting in that work to get there because, it's not going to be handed to you at the end of the day.
Yeah, because um, I can probably remember 2 vacations that we went on my whole childhood and teenage years. So, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and another thing too, what helped me out at an earlier age, and I think can help out a lot of the listeners, no matter what the age is, adopt a mindset of curiosity. So, when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, starting to understand business a little bit better, if I would go to one of my friend's house and they had, a house with a pool or a house on the water, I'd go up to their father and say, hey, what do you do? Or how did you get this? Or what do you do in business? And I think I still have that curiosity mindset today of just trying to learn from others who are successful. And I think if you can adopt that, then, you're going to be in a far better place because each conversation you have, you can learn something and use that to apply to, your level of success that you want to have.
Well, so many people they enjoy all this stuff as they're young, but then as they get older, then they're struggling and they're having a more difficult time as to where you've kind of said, okay, I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna build my nest egg now, and then I'll start enjoying those things later on. So while they're struggling, you're the one by the pool with your sunglasses on, enjoying the weather. You know?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's all about sacrifices and being willing to make them. Whether it's spending a longer time at the office, whether it's not going out a couple times a week, going out to eat so you can save money and get to that financial goal. I think life is just one big sacrifice that you have to make to get to that next goal. But being able to balance it too,
Oh
being
yeah.
in that position to make a couple sacrifices, but then giving yourself a reward at the end of the day too.
Oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with when you've mowed grass all day long and going down to find the ice cream truck or something. Something little to say, hey, I did good. I can put all the rest of this away. I got myself a little treat now. But what's your ultimate goal?
Yeah. So my ultimate goal, you know, there's so many things that I just have in my mind, run through it every single day. Ultimately, my goal would be to retire at 50. And when I say retire, it's not ultimately just sit on a beach all day and, relax, read books or watch TV. My goal of that is having that financial freedom to not have to work another day in your life. And also on my end, learning what I've learned in business and will continue to learn in business and join from an advisory standpoint, where I'd love to help companies get to that next level, get to that point B, or help people get to that point B, and really give back on the lessons that I have learned through the years and will continue to learn throughout the years as well.
Now, we were talking before we went on air, and you were talking about how you got to that junior year of high school, and it kind of turned things around for you. You want to tell that story?
Yeah, definitely. So, I viewed high school. I went to a huge high school. I mean, 3,000, 4,000 students. And the way I viewed high school was the time with your closest friends, and that's about it. I didn't really understand the whole studying school part. I would get done with class and immediately go to the beach and surf, go skateboard, or go work. And my grades started to slip exponentially. I was hanging out with the wrong crowd, skipping classes, showing up late, just hanging out with the wrong crowd, which I think can drastically affect your level of success, because you hear it all the time. You are who you surround yourself with, and I was becoming who I was surrounding myself with. And ultimately, my junior year of high school, I stepped in my guidance counselor's office, and I'm all excited. I'm like, oh, I'm looking at this school, so and so's looking at this school. I'm excited, and they ran some information where they're able to plug in my grades and plug in what the colleges wanted. And she gave me some very bad news that I had a 0% chance to get into any college. And that hit me really hard, because, even some of my colleagues that were in that, quote unquote, kind of wrong circle that I was hanging out with, they were still able to get into some schools. And I'm sitting here kind of being left in the dust, getting that horrible news of, hey, you have 0% chance to get into any of these schools, any four-year school. And it was ultimately a big shift of, I personally really wanted to go to college. Not that I think that it's 100% necessary, especially with, how many courses and certifications there are out there. But personally, I really wanted to go. So the news hit me pretty hard. And, ultimately that was a big turning point for me of really just kind of doing an analysis and self-awareness and audit of my life of like, okay, I want to get to college. What does it take to get to college? It takes good grades. What does it take to get good grades? It takes time to buckle down and study. It takes time to learn. It takes time to actually open a textbook and read it. It takes time staying after class, asking, how can you help me with this? Or how can you help me with this worksheet, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a big turning point. And ultimately what I did there was buckled down, ended up, getting a lot better grades second half junior year, senior year. Ultimately spent some time at the College of Charleston for my freshman year, and then ultimately was able to transfer to Clemson University on a scholarship, and then graduated with honors as well. And, shortly prior to that, going from the 0% chance to getting into any school to ultimately graduating from Clemson University with honors, to then moving up to Charlotte about 2 years ago. Landing a great job where I was doing some account management, consulting, staffing work, ultimately to where I am now, executive director of a company that makes annual economic business intelligence publications on major metro cities, being the founder and host of my own podcast, and also the co-founder of a travel application that's actually launching once some of this COVID stuff goes away. So,
oh wow, you have been busy.
Yeah, definitely.
So you got a young person listening to this, and they're saying, you know what, this is great for you. You did it, but I just have no chance. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think personally that there's always a solution to every problem, no matter what it is. There's so much information out there that can help you. There's so many people out there that are willing to help you. I think it's just spending that time to actually create that solution for yourself. So I'll give you a pretty recent relevant example. How we built out this annual economic business report is we interviewed 250 to 300 of the top CEOs in Charlotte, North Carolina. There are a few Fortune 500 public companies here, so getting in touch with their CEOs to arrange an interview can be pretty difficult, especially when you're on the stock market. There's so many investor relations guys you have to talk to, and there's a few of them that told me no 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. And I've met with all of them that said no 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times, because I just figured out a solution to make it work. And I think that's a prime example of you get said no, there's no chance, keep going, keep looking into ways to learn, and then ultimately find that solution that can help get you to that next level.
I've told this story on another show before, but you've heard of the cleaning product Formula 409.
Oh yeah.
All right, do you know why it's called Formula 409?
No, I don't.
Because the first 408 times it didn't work.
No way.
Exactly.
Wow.
So, persistence.
Yeah. Persistence, showing up every day, no matter what the circumstance is. I think the big things happen when you don't feel like doing it the most. You know, if you're waking up one day, you're tired, you're just, feel like you're getting burnt out. It's the big things happen when you just keep going forward, keep moving forward, and keep that persistence up, because life is a huge competition.
Yes, it
And
is.
when you first started out, that it's such a strong ceiling. There's so many people, such heavy competition, but then it gets less and less and less and less, because you know when people don't feel like waking up in the morning, half of that crowd's not going to wake up early in the morning. You're going to pass that. When they don't feel like getting to the office an hour early and you pass that threshold, they don't feel like staying at the office till 7 or 8, you pass that threshold. Ultimately, your competition over the years gets less and less and less, because less and less and less people are willing to put in that type of work during the bad times and the sucky times, if that makes sense.
Oh, you know, there's so many times that I've just said, you know what, I'm ready to give up. I'm done. Here I am, 50 years old. You know, arthritis has taken over. And I had to quit working because my body was just wore out.
Mm.
And it's just easy to say, well, you know what, I'm done for. I can just lay around and be lazy and just not do anything. And luckily, I had gotten a good enough job working for the city government that I was able to save up a pretty good retirement. Um, Granted, it's not enough to live off of by myself, but I just decided, you know what, I'm not going to sit around and just do nothing. I love podcasting. And you know what, I've started a network. Something that if you'd have told me 2 years ago you're going to be doing this, nope. Um, I'm actually hosting 3 different shows now,
Wow.
which I thought one was, was going to be too difficult. But you take those circumstances that you've been put in, and you say, you know what, I can make something out of it. I've told you before we got on air about there was some women that had been on the show that they had been through, being molested and things like that, and they've taken that tragedy and that experience and they've turned it around where they can be a help and a motivation to other people.
Yeah.
And it warms my heart when I get to see kids around your age. I say kids, you're an adult, but to me you're a kid.
Yeah.
My daughter's not much older than you are, but I see them with this motivation to actually do something in this life. Where you watch television and the millennials are all there's always something wrong with this generation.
Yeah.
But yet I meet people like you that said, you know what, I'm not going to let that hold me down. I'm going to move up in this world. And so, my hat's off to you.
Yeah. Thank you. That means a lot.
Okay, so you've graduated college.
Yep.
All right, and you've gone on to work in the business field. And you've made a success of that. I can see by you being here right now.
Yeah.
And but you do more than just that. So you want to explain, all those great things that you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. So, obviously in the 8 to 5, touched on it a little bit, doing the role where build out annual economic business intelligence publications. So I'm over the Charlotte region and doing some work in Atlanta as well. Additionally, though, my goal is to impact over 1 million people. And the one of the ways I do that is through my podcast, Next Level Minds, which really the main purpose of the podcast is really just to inspire everyone to reach their full potential. One of the reasons why I started that, as I touched on earlier, I've always had that mindset of curiosity. And when I got up to Charlotte, I'm thinking in my head, okay, how can I impact people, number one? And number two, how can I combine my passion to just hear stories and hear entrepreneurial, startups, hear how people got to that from point A to point B. How can I combine those two passions? And ultimately, I was like, you know what? A podcast is the perfect way to
Yes.
combine those, because you're hearing stories, you're learning from them yourself, and then you're using that as a platform to impact others around you and inspire them to reach a next level. So I run that podcast outside of, the typical 8 to 5. Been doing it for about a year. Definitely made some significant traction. Really excited on that. Just got a great guest lineup coming up for June and July. And additionally, I'm also the co-founder of the Visit Travel app, which my team and I are actually on our beta version right now. We're very, very close to being done with it. Really just kind of high level overview. It's just a unique way to kind of document your entire life's travel history, as well as get information and insights about particular places from people you know and trust. And I started that with two other gentlemen right after I pretty much graduated from Clemson. So a lot of stuff there, running a full 8 to 5 career over the Charlotte region, running a podcast, and then a co-founder of a mobile application that's launching soon as well. So kind of a lot all in one basket there.
Hey, that's the way you get things done, right?
Yeah.
I find that when you put yourself in a kind of an uncomfortable position, you've kind of motivated yourself to succeed, because I could have easily just stayed back around Houston and still been living in the same place doing the same things and all that, but I decided to take a chance. I moved to Austin. I don't know anybody up here. I don't know the area, but when you've put yourself in that situation where you have to learn to adapt, well then you're growing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And on my end, so I graduated in 2018, and at the time, my girlfriend at the time, she's my fiance now. She had a year left in school, and so it was a big decision for me of moving to Charlotte because even though it's only 2 hours away, obviously it's hard to get up there for the weekend, hard for her to come visit,
Mm-hmm.
and I could have easily taken a role, 30, 45 minutes from the school in Greenville, South Carolina. But I was like, I'm gonna get out of my comfort zone. So I moved up to Charlotte with knowing two people, literally in the whole entire city. And I even lived by myself the first year up here. And I was extremely out of my comfort zone because I didn't know anybody, number one. I didn't know how the city worked. Being in Charleston, it's definitely kind of that good old boys network. So I knew my
Mm-hmm.
way around. And Charlotte, and you kind of just ultimately starting from scratch, starting a new job where I knew nobody. But again, to kind of feed off what you were saying, getting out of your comfort zone is huge. I want to challenge everyone to do that in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, you don't have to move from your hometown, or you don't have to move across country, but do something every day to get you out of your comfort zone. Because if you don't, you're ultimately going to look back 3, 4, 5 years later and realize that you're, number one, complacent, and number two, pretty close to where you were 3, 4, 5 years ago before, because you never really tried to break out of that shell.
Oh,
So
exactly.
I think for me, I learned so much during that time because I would just, at first I would just go to networking events by myself, introduce, hey, I'm Chris Chapman. Nice to meet you. Here's what I do. Just moved here. Ultimately build up a pretty heavy in-person network that way. And a lot of people, I would never go to an event like that by myself. But I think it's just trying it out, just like anything else. Once you get there, once you start doing it, it's like going to the gym. Once you get up and actually go to the gym and lift that first weight, it's really not that bad. Same with getting out of your comfort zone. Once you get up, get out of it a little bit and start moving along, it's really not that bad. You just have to take that first initial step.
So, what is the next step for you after you've done the app and all that kind of stuff? What's that next step?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I've always been on that kind of entrepreneurial tendency. Ultimately, I would like to be completely out of the 8 to 5 corporate America role by 30. That's actually all of the co-founders of the app. We all have full-time gigs right now, and we tell each other that every day. So taking those initial steps to get out of that 9 to 5, that's definitely like my bigger hierarchy goal in the next 5 years. So I would say, each day I'm striving to that. And I think, the real magic, quote unquote, happens outside of the 8 to 5 hours. We're sitting here, it's almost 8 p.m. my time. It's almost 7 p.m. your time. We're doing something outside of the typical 8 to 5 right now that actually is going to help us get to that next level. versus just going 8 to 5, clocking in, clocking out, watching TV. We're working an extra 4 or 5 hours on something that we're passionate about because we want to get to that better place in life.
So I know a lot of people, they have like a mantra they'll say every day, or they have motivational boards with pictures and things like that. What is that one thing that kind of gets you revved up?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, and it's kind of a cliche answer, but I would say gratitude and perspective, because especially right now with COVID, and unfortunately, a lot of people are getting sick. A lot of people are in the hospital. Families are suffering. Just being alive and being well is huge. So something that really drives me is realizing that every single day is a new opportunity to get yourself to that goal that you want, or get yourself to that next level or that better place in life. So every day I wake up, I journal in the morning, and the first thing that I write down is something that I'm thankful for. I write
Yes.
down 5 key, it's called a power list. I write down 5 key things that I'm going to do that day that are going to help get me to the next level in my career, my business, my personal life, my relationship, and my physical life. 5 separate things that I'm gonna do, actions that are gonna get me to that next level in those 5 key areas. And then the last thing I write before I start the day in a journal is, today is gonna be a great day. Let's make it happen.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. You
Yeah.
know, I've heard successful people that they've talked about what they do to start their day. That they'll get up and they'll make their bed, and it sounds so simple, but they make their bed, they brush their teeth, they take a shower, make their breakfast, clean the dishes, and then they get out the door, and they've got this list of things that they've already accomplished for the day. And it sounds like a big deal. Everybody does that. Well, you know what? Look at it this way. Look what you've done already. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And just to feed off that, I mean, I'm huge on the daily habits, especially starting in the morning. And success, at least in my opinion, it's definitely a lot of work and very difficult, but there's so many habits that you can just follow. I mean, you can type in right now in Google habits of the world's, most famous billionaires, and literally it's public information that you can read most of their habits. And so then it's actually just following in those footsteps. Like for me, it's waking up before 6 a.m., getting a workout in the morning, drinking 2 to 3 cups of water, obviously just getting that hydration going, and then spending some time. I don't do this every day just from a time perspective, but spending some time actually in some meditation. And people are like, oh, what are you doing, like floating in the air? I'm like, no, literally just listen to some soft music and visualizing, number one, what I'm extremely thankful for about
Mm-hmm.
3 to 5 minutes. And then number two, visualizing 3 to 4 goals that I want to happen in life, and actually looking at my life of what would that happen if what would happen right now if my podcast did get 1 million subscribers per episode. What would it look like if I was able to take the app full time in the next 1 year? What would it look like, if I ultimately closed some huge deals at work next month, and was able to actually take an awesome vacation? Actually visualizing what that looks like. And then your brain's going to work in a way that the actions just follow that visualization. And I'm doing all that before 7 a.m. in the morning. And I already have such a charge in my mind ahead of my competition that I'm just ultimately ready to attack the day.
People don't realize how important it is to visualize what you want. What is it you truly want? And when you visualize all day long, because you're bombarded with negativity all the time, with the news and stupid stuff you see on social media and all that garbage. So much negativity, and if that's what you're filling your head up with, that's what your life becomes. Negative, negative, negative. You've got to fill it with that positive. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just like you kind of got me pumped up with the social media. Something that I did was just I started unfollowing a bunch of accounts that just weren't adding any value to my life.
Yeah.
There's so many just accounts out there that are negative, or things that honestly you just shouldn't be looking at. And so I unfollowed a ton of those and started following way more business motivational content. That made me feel a lot better. And then I think you just touched on this too. You are what you eat. So if you're watching the news all day, and I don't think these are bad. I love these occasionally, but watching hours and hours of raunchy comedies every night, you're
Mm-hmm.
ultimately going to be what you watch and what you see and what you read. So it's all about that balance. Sure, on the weekends, if you're hanging out with your buddies, drinking a few beers, watch a funny comedy or watch some Family Guy, watch some South Park, but don't watch that 3 to 4 hours a night every single
Mm.
night, because you're ultimately going to become what you read and what you watch. So spend that time during the week reading some personal development books, listening to podcasts, writing in your journal. And then on the weekends, obviously still keep up with that, but have that balance and just kind of relax and cool off a little bit too.
My wife has a saying that she tells the kids all the time is, you show me your friends and I'll show you your future. So if you got all these negative people around you, then that's what your future is going to end up being. So yeah, you're right. You got to surround yourself with the right people and feeling positivity in your brain.
Yeah, for sure. And that's awesome that your wife thinks that way. Because I remember growing up, there's certain kids, obviously, that I'm sure, being a father, you've had some of this where you're like, hey, don't hang out with them too much, or I don't want you over at their house too late. And even just with watching shows as a kid growing up, but hey, we don't want you watching that show. And obviously, as a kid, you probably never get it because you're like, wow, like I want to do this. But now I realize, like, oh wow, they were just doing that stuff to protect me, to protect my future, because again, you are what you eat, you are what you put into your mind.
Oh yeah, it's kind of weird, but ever since we've been on this lockdown, I've probably watched less television than I did before, and it seems like my days are becoming more positive. I'm not watching the news except for maybe to catch the weather, or something locally going on, whatnot. Of course you got to know what's going on with the virus and everything, but since I've been staying away from the boob tube so much, life seems to be getting a lot better.
Yeah, it's funny how that works too. It's spend some time off of all that, and then your perspective is just so much clearer.
So yeah, I've watched Superman, so I'll be Superman now.
Exactly. Exactly.
No, but seriously, just staying away from that so much television. I mean, we'll still watch a couple of hours in the evenings. Usually, something my wife and I are both really interested in. She likes the home improvement shows, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Got no problem with that.
Yeah, I think music too plays a big part in it.
Oh
If you're listening to music all day that's just talking about getting drunk, partying, smoking weed, dealing drugs with a nice beat behind it, that's ultimately going to affect your mindset. But I think it's filling your mind with that proper music. Like, it doesn't have to be freaking gospel music, but
yeah.
actually taking the time to listen to stuff that's positive, because again, you don't want to fill your mind with that junk, because you're going to be what you're putting in there.
Oh yeah, there's something about listening to some really good positive music and that's got a good beat to it. The Beatles, that's my thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think too, spending time, especially right now with like the whole social distancing, I try to talk to at least 3 to 4 of my friends a week who I know are extremely positive, and no agenda, just calling saying, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? And then we're both positive people, so we're just feeding off each other, and both of us, no matter what friend it is, as long as they kind of have that positive mindset as well, leaving that conversation just in such a good mood, because you're number one, you're filling yourself with positivity, with the journaling, the gratitude, not watching a ton of TV. Then you get off of work after you hopefully had a great day because you've started the morning off strong, and then spending 30 for 45 minutes talking to a friend or colleague who's also positive. I mean, you've been awake for 15 hours, 13, 14 hours of positivity right there. I mean, not much can go wrong in the mindset that way.
True. Well, I get up and I make breakfast and I make coffee, so I've made the wife happy. So that my day is definitely going to be positive.
Happy wife, happy life. Is that what they say, right?
That's exactly it. So, after all that's said and done, and you've hit your retirement age, and I know you've got some kind of goals after that. It's not going to stop right where you retired.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, and something I've realized is I don't think success has any one destination point of like, okay, I completely made it. We're here now. I'm cooling off, because, I've been on a few podcasts, this being one of them, and I'm talking about how my journey getting, the high school, growing up, paying for stuff, almost failing out, 0% chance, going to college, getting a job, podcast, app, all this stuff. And I'm telling this story, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's a great destination point." But I'm thinking to myself, I'm only 2 to 3% done of everything that I want to accomplish. So I think even more successful people, even the guys you hear on podcasts or keynote speakers, authors, very successful, 7, 8 figure entrepreneurs talking about their journey of how they got there. I think a lot of them are also just scratching the surface of where they want to be. So I think for me, and I think for a lot of listeners out there, to have your success is just an evolving process. Always be thinking like, how can you get to that next level? Again, not being complacent. Yeah, you can have a retirement age, but for me, it's like, once I retire, I'm not done yet. I'm gonna start advising companies. I want to have a few books under my belt that I've written. I want to obviously be speaking at events to talk about what I've learned and giving back and impacting people. And then I'm gonna say, okay, how can I, expand this even more and take that a step further and take that a step further? Because again, I think success is just an evolving process, an evolving next level you should be striving to.
Yeah, there's a goofy movie by I think it's Adam Sandberg. It's got the corniest name, but it makes a lot of sense. Is Never Stop, Never Stopping.
Never stop, never stopping. I'm gonna have to write that down. I love that.
But I mean, it's true. I mean, you had guys like Stan Lee. Okay, the guy could have easily given up when he first got into the biz, but he this is what ended up happening. Have you ever heard the story of Stan Lee when he first got into comics?
Yeah, I've heard a little bit bits and pieces. I'm sure you know a lot better though.
Well, the whole deal was, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing it, but he got to the point where he was ready to just leave the comics and all that behind, and he's like, I can't do what I want to do or whatever, and his wife says, you know what, if you're going to quit anyway, why don't you just go ahead and do a comic the way you'd want it done, and if you get, you lose your job or whatever, it's no big deal, you're quitting anyway. And the next thing you know, he's got Spider-Man and X-Men and all these other that he's, writing for, and the man never stopped. I mean, he kept going until the day he died. He was still showing up in Marvel movies and things like that, and he was, well into his 90s, so don't stop. Keep going.
Yeah. That's that's inspiring story too, and it's funny what can happen if you just have free reign and be extremely creative. I mean, he just kind of said, I'm going to do me, and ultimately look what happened with the comics, right?
Oh yeah, I mean the guy was practically a god to us nerdy people.
That's hilarious.
So, you got some other advice that you'd like to give folks before we end the show?
Yeah, I think just a couple tips, overall advice. Just again, adopting that mindset of curiosity, no matter what age you are, because I don't think you're never too young to teach and never too old to learn, right?
That's
so
right.
I think even if you're 50, 60 years old, whether you're in the end of the workforce or not, I think there's still people that you can learn from. I mean, even on my end, I learned some great digital marketing tips from a 14-year-old e-commerce guy the other day that I just met on Instagram comments and talked to him. Yeah, talked to him, and ultimately it was just a lot of stuff about social media advertisements. But if I had that closed mindset of, he's 14, he doesn't know what the heck he's talking about, I would have never learned some of these targeting tips that I've been doing for my podcast. So that came from being curious and having that open mindset. And then again, really just want to harp on advice wise of habits. I mean, you look at successful people, they got to where they are because of the habits that they implemented on a daily basis. Definitely want to challenge everyone out there, even if you're not a morning person, just to give it 2 or 3 weeks of waking up before 6 a.m. and having at least an hour and a half before the workday starts to get your mindset. And I'm not talking an hour and a half to cook breakfast and, take the kids to school and clean off the car, whatever, all the stuff that happens in the morning when you're busy, right? I'm talking an hour and a half of actual time and personal development, whether it's some meditation, reading a book, going to the gym, writing your goals down, visualizing. I want to challenge everybody to try to fit that in for the next 2 weeks. And I'm telling you, your day will be significantly better because you were able to lay such a strong foundation at the start of your day that's going to carry you through the rest. A lot of people ask, like, oh, a lot of my colleagues, coworkers, friends, are you just naturally born positive? I think a lot of people, are raised in a more positive fashion. If your, dad or mom is positive, you're probably going to be a more positive person when you're growing up. But I think positivity comes from laying that foundation at the start of your day. I can have something horrible happen to me and people will ask, why aren't you upset? I'm like, yeah, I'm upset, but it's hard for me to show it right now because I have such a foundation and blockage of just positivity in my head from the foundation that I got to lay in the morning. And I don't think you're really going to get that unless you actually give it a try and start it. So,
Oh, there's so many people that could just say, my environment has caused me to be, poverty stricken and all this stuff. Bullcrap. I'm sorry, but there's you see the story of the gentleman on the movie was called The Pursuit of Happiness. Will
oh,
Smith.
love that movie. Yeah, with Will Smith. Yeah.
I do too because he had every reason in the world just to give up, but he didn't. And if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, I just going on that for a second. So many people play the blame game. I've met people 60, 70 that play the blame game. I've met people 15, 20 that play the blame game. And that's going to get you nowhere. And again, just actually bringing up some actually more final advice. Take ownership of the life that you have right now because ultimately it does all fall onto you. The other day I had some just unfortunate news right when COVID hit, just with my company that I'm working at. Obviously, everything's fine now, but I was a little upset for a second, and I'm like, wait a second. No one held a gun to my head and told me to take this job. No one forced me to get up today and go do this. No one forced me to, choose to say yes to this. It's ultimately all on me at the end of the day. And yeah, it sounds like it stinks because you're putting so much weight on you, but you're exponentially happier at the end of the day when you can put full ownership on yourself because then you realize that everything good that happens is your fault and you can keep making good things happen. And everything bad that happens is also your fault. And you can do the good things to make good things out of the bad things happen because you've taken out ownership.
Oh, for sure. And if people want to follow you or to listen to your podcast, I mean, how do they reach you?
Yeah, definitely. So podcast is Next Level Minds. We do episodes every other week, and then the third week of the month on Monday, I do Motivation Monday, just about 5-10 minutes talking about gratitude, perspective, just really getting everyone in the right mood. And Instagram is a good spot to reach me from a public perspective, and it's just Chris Chap Chap. That's my Instagram handle, and LinkedIn as well. You can just type in Chris Chapman. Usually one of the first to come up if you're in the Southeast on that level. So.
Okay. And the podcast, is it like on iHeartRadio, Spotify, all that?
Yeah, so it's on the Google Play Store for the Android guys out there, and it's on Apple Podcast and as well as Spotify, and it's on Podbean as well, which is the hosting service I use, but you can look at it on the website there. So.
Yeah, I hear that's a really good platform.
Yeah, and if any of y'all like traveling, and obviously wait until COVID ends, but you can reach out to Team Visit at visittravelapp.com if you want to be one of our early beta testers to try out the app before we actually launch in the Apple App Store. So,
oh, can you send me your link to?
Yeah,
and I can post that on our social media so we can get that out there to everyone.
oh, for sure. Yeah, I'll throw the email in there. You'll just have to reach out and say beta, and then we'll add you to the list so everyone can try it out.
Well, thank you so much, man. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure being on the show, and thank you for what you're doing. Just trying to add value out there and spread some positivity.
Well, keep it up, man. We need more people like you in this world.
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
You're half my age, and you've already taught me more in 5 minutes than I've learned in 50 years. So,
hey, you're never too young to teach, right?
never too old to learn.
Yep.
But anyway, thank y'all for joining us, and stay tuned. We're going to have some more great guests coming up in some of our future episodes. Thank you.